right, guys, we can get started. Thank you and thank you and Malala for joining us for this information session about human trafficking today. As you might be able to tell, I'm on the tail end of a head cold. I'm no longer in the contagious era, but I do have a mask on to be cautious. There are masks and hand sanitizer over by the door. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're gathered on unceded land that has never been surrendered. I'm grateful to live and work in Mi'kma'ki. Rather than offering a traditional land acknowledgement alone, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the ways that you personally support reconciliation. I personally intentionally support Indigenous-owned businesses, which is a small but meaningful way to contribute to Indigenous livelihoods. And I encourage the use of local Indigenous language, Mi'kmaq. If reconciliation is not something that you're currently engaged with, I encourage you to start by learning the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action and consider how they might inform your own actions moving forward. So my name is Jennifer Teal. I'm the coordinator at the Lotus Centre, which is the Women's Resource Centre located in Truro. We serve the Central Nova area. I'm proud to present a few folks in the room who are presenting and or who have been active in the planning and facilitation of today's event. And when I introduce you, if you could just give like a quick wave. We have two presenters today. We have Kendra. She's the partnership specialist for the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. And we have Claire. Claire, there you are. She's the peer support coordinator for GATE, which is an acronym Girls Against Trafficking and Exploitation. From the Lotus Centre, we have Michaela. She's the executive director. And Ingrid, our women's support worker. Here. And we're grateful for our partnership with the local community health board that serves the Truro area. From the community health board, we have Becky McManus, she's the coordinator over here. And Paula Withrow is the co-chair beside her. Because of our partnership with the Truro Area Community Health Board, we're able to provide a lunch after the session today, help with transportation costs for those in need, and they help promote our event to reach a greater audience. So thank you, ladies, and your board for your ongoing support. And just a reminder, we are currently live on Zoom. Audio from this room is being transmitted. Please keep this in mind if you choose to share any information. You might also see me taking some photos during the event, and I will not, any pictures I take won't have your guys' faces in it. Once both Kendra and Claire have completed their presentations, I'll end the Zoom call and stop the recording, and we'll move to a more private question and answer period. After this, food will be arriving, and again, thank you, Community Health Board, for that. And then we'll have an opportunity to connect, network, and have a more informal visit. Finally, today's content might be distressing. It's a very difficult topic, and we truly appreciate that you're all here and willing to learn. If at any point you feel you're impacted, we want to be able to help. You're always welcome to step out and go use the washroom, and we're not going to follow you. But if you, if you feel like you are emotionally affected, I invite you to take, there's a little pink octopus on the table by the door. He's the emotional support octopus. And if you leave with that, someone will come out and check in, make sure that you're okay. Awesome. So without further ado, Kendra's gonna start the presentation.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I see some familiar faces in the audience. Happy to be here. As she mentioned, my name is Kendra McKinnon. I'm actually from Truro. I live in Truro. I've worked in this area for over 20 years in domestic violence, sexualized violence, and human trafficking. I am a partnership specialist at the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking. We are, sorry, the clicker doesn't work. We are a national nonprofit that was established in 2016 with our mission is to end all forms of trafficking in Canada. And we also are the operators of the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-833-900-1010. There'll be a quiz at the end to see if you know the number, just joking. Anybody can call this number 24/7. Today, our vision. So we do have a vision. It's a strong Canada without human trafficking, and our mission is to serve as the catalyst to end all forms of trafficking in Canada. There's two main forms of trafficking in Canada, sex trafficking or human trafficking and labor trafficking. But for today's presentation, I'm going to stick solely with the human trafficking piece. We do have a labor trafficking specialist on our team that does those types of presentations. So just to give you a little background, I know that the center and the hotline's not really well known in this part of the country. We do operate our 24/7 hotline. We have an amazing research and data team that we have at the center. I'm going to talk about some of the research and data that we have published, and that's on our website in a few slides. We do a lot of education pieces, which I'm doing right now. We do a lot of collaboration, we leverage networks, and we also mobilize policymakers across the country. So it's kind of a unique vantage point from a national perspective to be able to see what's going on across the country from coast to coast. So as Jen mentioned, I just wanted to give a little content warning. This presentation will address some topics related to sex trafficking. Some content may be triggering to individuals or emotionally challenging. Please grab the pink octopus if you need to step out and need some support. When we do these presentations, we always assume that there are victims and survivors of violence and trafficking in the audience. So we really want to be mindful of this. So I did have she didn't bring it, but I have a table of contents. I was just going to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to go over the common myths. We're going to go over what trafficking is. We're going to go over recruitment, peer recruitment, the spectrum of sexual exploitation. We're going to do some trends and some research. And then we're going to talk about the hotline, and then I'll leave you with some resources. So, oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself there. All right, so does everybody know the movie Taken? Everybody thinks that human trafficking is like the movie Taken, right? The white van, the person that's going to kidnap you off the side of the street and force you into sexual exploitation. There are cases where that has actually happened, but in our communities, that's not how trafficking operates, right? Trafficking is more of a process, a slow process of manipulation, coercion, and is usually done under the umbrella of a relationship, intimate partner relationship, or friendship. So it often starts with someone that you trust, right? And someone that you think may be a friend or a romantic partner. But we really have to be careful when we're looking at trafficking and not looking for the boogeyman hiding in the bushes, right? It's the people that we know and that we trust and that we have relationships with that are going to be the ones that are more than likely setting you up to be trafficked. So this drives me crazy. I mean, it is a good movie, but it's really not an accurate representation of what trafficking looks like. People think that trafficking is a border issue. It's not a border issue. It's an issue in our communities. Oftentimes people think that trafficking only involves women and girls. Unfortunately, men and boys are impacted too. And listen, trying to get services and resources for men and boys that have been impacted by trafficking is very, very hard. I think across the country in our national referral directory, we maybe have a handful of men-specific organizations that are leading the work in trafficking with boys and men, right? Oftentimes boys and men get portrayed as pimps, right? And not individuals that are being targeted and being trafficked. So that's one myth or a couple of myths. Not every victim looks distressed, right? Everybody thinks that if you're involved in trafficking, you're handcuffed, locked in a room, you know, you can't go out, in and out, but you can, right? And not every victim looks like they're distressed. That's another thing that people are looking for the wrong things, right? You're expecting somebody to look disheveled, distressed, that they need help. You could be sitting beside somebody that's being trafficked. You just don't know. It could be anybody, right? So we really have to keep that in mind when we are supporting individuals that are at risk of trafficking. And this is another myth, a gift today, control tomorrow. We're going to talk about some of the indicators of trafficking on some slides ahead. But you know, if you're getting gifts and money and all kinds of things, there may be an underlying reason why that person is giving you these things, right? It's to control you. And again, we'll talk about that in another slide. But again, trafficking looks different in different communities. So we have to be aware of the things to look for. Again, chains are visible, control isn't. It's the invisible chains of the mind control and the psychological manipulation that you can't see, right? That people are dealing with that keeps them entrenched in trafficking. If it was just easy to leave, people could leave. And people are like, why don't you leave? You know, you're not handcuffed, you're not forced in a place or a residence to leave, but it's the psychological, it's the chains, the invisible chains of the mind control and the trauma bonding, right? Traffickers are so well rehearsed in the mind control piece. And that's something that it can take a really long time for a victim or survivor to get over the trauma bonding and want to leave that situation. So again, chains are visible, control isn't. These are a few myths, not all of them. I am going to show you this video. It was from 2023. Public safety put it out. We do get some funding from public safety. I will show you the video. It's a little triggering. And this is just really driving home the fact that it's not the strangers, it's not the people that we don't know. 1 in 3 partners, or 1 in 3 individuals are trafficked by an intimate partner, family member, or friend. So I hope this works. So again, 1 in 3 victims in Canada were trafficked by an intimate partner. So this really drives home the fact that trafficking, that's how trafficking is operating in our communities across the country. And it is a very, very wicked problem, right? And it's complex and it's interconnected and there is no simple solution. And it takes a community of individuals to actually combat human trafficking. We all have to be aware of what's happening around us and looking out for warning signs and checking in on people that are vulnerable. So, what is human trafficking? It's the control and exploitation of a person, causing them to provide sexual services or forced labor through the use of lies, manipulation, coercion, and threats. That is simply what it is. And I just wanted to say that under the age of 18, you cannot consent to being trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation. It's against the law, right? It's important to know that because some of our youth don't understand that, right? Here's some risk factors. I mean, we could spend a whole day talking about risk factors for trafficking. We've just highlighted a high level. Language barriers is a huge risk factor. Being female is a risk factor. Those newcomers to Canada, individuals involved in the child welfare system are at a greater risk of being trafficked than the general population. There's a huge correlation between that. Individuals that are impoverished or homeless, individuals from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, the youth age demographic 14 to 25. Now we're hearing victims are as young as 11. Ontario Native Women's Association just did a presentation a couple months ago, and they're saying they are seeing 11-year-olds that are being trafficked. I'm fortunate to sit on a coalition in Ottawa virtually, and their Catholic school board was reporting that there was girls aged 11 that were disappearing for blocks of time during the school day and not being able to account or verbalize where they've been and what they've been doing. So huge, huge risk. Individuals with mental health challenges are at a far greater risk of being trafficked. Again, foreign nationals. Access to social media, that's the number one, really. Access to social media and low self-esteem go hand in hand, and that is a trafficker's, prime candidate to traffic. Urban environment, I mean, people are trafficked in more urban environments, but rurally and in this community, trafficking is happening all the time. And individuals from the LGBTQ+ community are at a greater risk. And these are just some of them, as I mentioned, not all of them, but we really need to pay attention to our youth demographic big time, because that's where the traffickers are going, 14 to 25. So this is the spectrum of sexual exploitation and how sex trafficking happens. There's stages. I mean, the stages can take weeks or months, but honestly, the quicker the trafficker gets that person involved and entrenched, the quicker they can make money off them, right? So we've got the luring process, which is establishing a connection either in person or online. But let's be real, the majority of trafficking is happening online, right? In-person trafficking isn't happening as much, but it's running rampant online. So the luring process happens when the trafficker, their only intent is to develop that relationship with that person for the sole purpose of exploitation, right? They're luring you in. And traffickers can throw out 1,000 messages a day on Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, wherever, and they just need one vulnerable person to take the bait. And then the luring process begins, right? And then during that process of luring, they're finding out all of your hopes and your dreams and the things that you like, or maybe you told them that, you know, you don't like your parents and you don't like school, and they're building you up and filling you full of like amazing compliments and love. And maybe they're buying you clothes and getting your nails done, or maybe they're just giving you a coach to stay on in exchange for, you know, sex if you're homeless, or maybe they are, you know, feeding you. And so the grooming process, again, it can take place over weeks or months. But if the trafficker's good, they're going to get their ducks in a row sooner than later, so they can get that person out. So then there's the luring, the grooming, and then comes the isolation piece, which is also key. The traffickers are really good at creating distance between the individual and their friends or family. Or their circles of support, right? Kind of saying things like, you know, why would you want to hang out with them? You told me you didn't like them, or, you know, you said your parents were stupid. You know, it's just you and I, babe. You know, you don't need them. It's all about us, right? And then comes the manipulation and the coercion piece, which is a real mind F. I won't say the word, but you know what I mean. It starts with F and ends in K. The mind F of it all, right, is where the trafficker's sending you all those mixed messages, right? Like, baby, I love you, you know, it's only going to be this one time. And after that, it's you and me, or I owe this guy a favor. And, you know, could you please do it for me? And then you feel like really the only way that you can participate, or the only option that you have is to participate in those commercial sex acts, right? So again, you know, it's the whole psychological manipulation piece that plays a huge part in keeping people entrenched in trafficking. And then there's the exploitation piece, right? That, you know, the traffickers always ensuring ongoing participation in those commercial sex acts while taking away all of their earnings. They may get some, they may get none, they may just get their basic needs met or not. And this spectrum of sexual exploitation can go on and on and on. We know it's not like a straight line. It's like a roller coaster for some people. So a few indicators of trafficking. I mean, again, we could spend a whole day on indicators, but these are the high level ones. Really watch out for those unexplained absences from school and withdrawal from friends and families and activities. Those sudden changes in appearances, right? If you know somebody that, you know, never wore makeup or never had their hair done or never had their nails done, and they're getting all these things, but they don't really have a way of explaining where it's coming from and how they're getting it, right? Or, you know, so we really have to be mindful of that. Providing scripted or rehearsed answers to casual questions. And I'm sure some of you folks that are in the field have seen this in your work on a daily basis. You know, sometimes when you talk to people, it's just yes, no eye contact, looking down. You know, they're afraid to, you know, share anything. It could be an indicator. Secretive behavior about a new friend group or boyfriend, that's key as well, right? If you know somebody that has a friend or a boyfriend and they're you know with them all the time, but you've never met them, they are hanging out with them, or they're gone for hours at a time and not being able to explain who they're with, that's a red flag, right? It could be an indicator that somebody is being involved in trafficking. Expressing fear and intimidation through body language and facial expressions could be another indicator. Branding with the tattoo's name or symbol is a big one. Before I joined the center, I did some frontline work with some trafficking victims, and we had worked with individuals that were branded with the trafficker's tattoo. Pretty much branding them like a cow, right? Like saying it's your property. So if there's another trafficker that's out there and they see, you know, your tattoo, wherever it is, to know, oh, wait, that's so-and-so's girl. I can't, you know, I can't move in and, you know, try to bring that person with me. There's that.
There are tattooers locally that will cover those for.
Yes, yes. And in our National Referral Directory of Services, we have service providers that will do that for free in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, all across the country. And that's great. It is really great. I had a request come into the hotline from a service provider in Moncton, the Jade Centre. They had a victim that wanted a laser removal done, and they didn't have anybody. So I just cold called a laser company in Moncton and said, hey, this is so-and-so. We have a victim that needs a tattoo removal done. Can you do it? They're like, absolutely. So, you know, you can call, you can advocate for people to get those things done, because we don't want to be reminded of the tattoo, because every time you look down or look at wherever, you're always reminded of that part of your life. So that's huge. Frequent absences from home and school, that's another one, right? You have to think about that. Those visible signs of abuse like cuts, bruises, burns, fatigue, all those things, we have to be mindful of that. In the past, working with individuals, she was entrenched in trafficking. The trafficker asked her to participate in a commercial sex act. She said no, and he put his cigarette on her forearm. So, you know, you have to be mindful of those things and just approach them with care, you know, and support. Also, not having a passport or other forms of ID in their possession. Traffickers love to take your ID, your driver's license, your health card, so you can't go out and leave or access services, right? Because we need to have a health card to access healthcare services. We need our driver's license for ID. Sometimes what traffickers will do is they will take their victim's driver's license, hold on to them, and the only time they see them is when they make them rent a car, right, in their name, so they can, you know, travel around and get them to participate in commercial sex acts. So it's very mindful. The passport, not so much. That's more labor trafficking related, but any types of ID or anything, they should remain with the person all the time. So those are just a few high level indicators. Recruitment. So the recruitment process, well, a lot of it's happening online, social media, but fake job ads, and I'm not sure if there's many of those fake jobs ads anymore, but remember back when we used to have the newspaper, actors want it, models want it, you know, come to a hotel in Halifax or Dartmouth or wherever. You know, those were ways for traffickers to get women and young women into their hotel rooms to see what they look like and see how vulnerable they are, right? Under the guise of, you know, a modeling job or an acting job or whatever. Social media is the number one recruitment, because traffickers can hide behind computer screens and not have their identity known, right? Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, Discord for any of the boys and men in here. Gaming platforms are horrendous for men, trolling on there, getting our boys to send videos and live stream sex acts. We have to be really careful about that. If you have youth in your life, I got a 12-year-old, I always check his social media. Snapchat's probably the worst because of the snap maps and the real-time location. Traffickers can track where you are and you don't even know, because you have your location on and everybody can see that you're at the library or you're at Tim Hortons, right? Got to be really careful with that. I was really disappointed to learn at a conference that Pinterest is a platform that traffickers are using as well, which I thought was safe, but it's not. They do, traffickers make up certain boards, sex themed boards and all these other boards, and they use that as a way to traffic individuals. School is also another place. And right beside that is peer recruitment. We have peers in our schools that are recruiting individuals on behalf of traffickers, right? Because it's safer for the trafficker to have a peer or a youth in our school than for them to be hanging outside the school at lunchtime or, you know, hanging around the youth center. So we really have to be careful. And a lot of I'll say women and girls that are doing the peer recruitment probably don't want to be doing it, but they're doing it because the trafficker is making them. And also it's less sex that they have to do if they have somebody else working with them, right? So The peer recruitment thing, again, we could talk about that all day, but it does go hand in hand with school and social media. Institutions, I mean, recruitment can happen at institutions, right? Shelters, what better of a place for a trafficker to hang out than homeless shelter, women's shelter, food banks, youth employment centers. I see some Future Works people here. Back in, I think, December, the region of Peel was having such an issue with traffickers targeting the vulnerable youth at their youth employment centers that they were requesting a lot of education and awareness for their staff because they were running into it all of the time. Family members, nobody wants to talk about familial trafficking. Nobody wants to think that, you know, their parents, their uncle, their cousin could traffic them. They also have to think about the people that are born into familial trafficking situations that don't know any better. They think that this is normal, right? But that's also another big topic. And transit. I mean, we don't have public transit here, but nationally, many cities and towns have public transit. However, I did a presentation for Pictou Landing First Nations, and they have a transit system now that goes into their community and goes to in and out of New Glasgow. And they are reporting men following the buses back into the community, watching the young women and girls get off the bus and seeing where they live and where they're going and targeting them. They're having a really hard time there in Pictou. Now, it's great that they reduce the barrier of transportation for communities, but it also brings along a lot of other issues with people coming into community and following people, right? And knowing where they live. So these are just some of the places where recruitment can happen. The next slide's just some scenarios that we've actually had peer trafficking situations. So these are actual real situations, just so you can see visually like what some of the peers are using to get victims entrenched in trafficking. So I'll read a few of them. So it seems pretty easy, right? Like, my friends are getting paid to have sex with older guys. They said I could make money too. I could really use the cash. But my friend's boyfriend will help me, but he'll take a cut, right? My parents kicked me out. I have nowhere to stay. Someone is offering me sex in exchange, a coach, in exchange for sex. That's trafficking. That's sexual exploitation. He convinced me to send him hot photos and make money. Now I'm being pressured to live stream sex. Again, another situation. My boyfriend owes this guy a favor. He says I'll only have to do it this once, and then we're exclusive. That's usually not the case. It's never just one time, right? I met this amazing new guy. He bought me gifts. He took me out. We partied. And now he says I have to pay him back. Remember the slide, a gift today, tomorrow it could be something else. But these are just some actually real world situations of peer-to-peer trafficking that we should be mindful of. And again, monitor your youth, their social media, their friends, and just keep vigilant in those situations. Quickly, we know that human trafficking is highly underreported. And why? Why is it so hard to identify? These are just a few of the reasons why victims and survivors usually don't come forward, for a million reasons. But some people don't even know that they are a victim of trafficking until they're out and they can actually name it and put a name on it. And some people spend years not even knowing. Can the police keep me safe? Probably not, right? We know that. I just want to move on. Some people just want to move on. I don't want to go to police. It was a terrible part of my life. I'm over it. And then the whole shame and stigma piece is huge. What are people going to think of me, right? What are people going to think of me to know that this is what I've been involved in over the last few years? And then the whole trauma bond. I still care about them, right? What if I go to jail? We know that a lot of victims that are trafficked do crimes like shoplifting, like petty crimes on behalf of their traffickers. What if I go to jail for something that I did under the coercion of my trafficker, right?
I was just going to say too, like, that peer-to-peer trafficking adds a lens of protection for the original trafficker in terms of being criminalized. Because
Yes.
The criminal code does not care if
Right.
you're also a victim if you are seen as a perpetrator.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And just to piggyback off that, and we know that we don't all want to report to police, but we do have a human trafficking unit with the RCMP. And I've worked with them pretty closely over the last few years. And I know that if you are a victim of trafficking, they will work with you to try to get those other charges dropped, taken care of. more so than, you know, anything else, if you go for help. And what about they threatened my family? We know the traffickers threaten families. They, you know, threaten to airdrop your nudes to your whole school or anywhere else. So that's another reason why it's hard to identify the crime. And just basically, what do we have in our community that has wraparound services and support to help somebody that's exiting? More than likely, you got to send them out of province. We have Halifax, we have NSTAY. That program's amazing, but that's for HRM, right? Like, why would somebody leave a trafficking situation where they have a place to live, they're being clothed, they're being fed, but you take them out and there's nowhere for them to go. There's no help. They're going to be homeless, right? So what are you going to do, right? Like, don't ever take anybody out of a situation like that unless you have the supports, right, for them. The whole, you know, rescue narrative isn't really that great when we're talking about victims and survivors of human trafficking, because it's so complex and so layered, right? And, you know, typically you can't really just go to a violence against women shelter. It takes a specific set of expertise to deal with all of the complex layers of trauma that individual has been going through. So those are just a few. I just thought it was important because we know it's highly underreported by the police. And then I think it's important to note that we do have individuals in our communities that are at greater risk of being trafficked, Black Canadians, Indigenous people, individuals from the 2S LGBTQI plus community, and again, those temporary foreign workers and newcomers who are at a greater risk of being labor trafficked, right? I always think about the labor trafficking, especially in the summertime and in our agricultural sector here and the farming and the seafood processing, because we have had cases over the last 3 years of labor trafficking. The apple processing plant in PEI had a big labor trafficking issue. The seafood processing in New Brunswick had labor trafficking issues. So it's really important that the Lotus Centre is doing outreach, I know, to some agricultural people in Great Village and just letting them know that they are at a greater risk of being trafficked. So I think it's really important to note that some statistics, as I mentioned before. So this is from 2025, StatsCan reports from 2013 to 2023, just over 4,500 incidences of human trafficking have been reported to police services in Canada. And 86% of incidences of HT were reported in metropolitan centers. 93% of the victims were women and girls. So that's the StatsCan from 2025. And I think we are the only organization or nonprofit in Canada that tracks HT data other than police. So we have all of our data and research that's available on our website if you ever want to know. And I'm so proud of being a Nova Scotian, but not this statistic here, unfortunately. And this was 2023. And remember, we're only scratching the surface with these numbers and this data because we know that people do not report. This is just the tip of the iceberg. In 2023, Nova Scotia continued to have the highest rate of police reported human trafficking incidences in Canada, with 6.3% of incidences per 100,000 population, significantly higher than the national average at 1.4. And Halifax also reported the highest annual rate of police reported HT incidents among all Canadian metropolitan areas in 2022. Everybody asked me, why does Halifax have the highest rate? Well, why do you think Halifax has the highest rate? Poverty, homelessness, we're a port city. We have the trafficking corridor, which I'll talk about on another slide, right? Victims are being trafficked from Halifax to Truro, to Amherst, to Moncton, to Fredericton, and then all the way back and around. So, and we also need more investment in anti-HT education, prevention, and awareness in this province. We do not have enough. In Ontario, 2 years ago, the school board mandated protocols on reporting for human trafficking in all their school districts in Ontario. It was mandatory. And I don't think the school boards have anything. It's hard to get into the schools. They don't want us in there. I can tell you that myself. Even from a national organization, we really struggle to get into the school system.
I got trained in the most incredible program for
Yep.
trafficking. The school would not accept us. They ignored us. They ignored us. They ignored us. And now we don't have the training to even provide to them
Yep.
because it ran out. They would not allow us in their schools. We tried every damn school in this province.
And do you know why? Because they don't want to open up a can of worms that they can't support and they don't have the expertise to do so, right? Right? Because if somebody discloses, then you have to do something about it, right? And if you don't have the budget or the education or even the resources to do it, they're not going to want you in.
When I worked at the Sexual Assault Center, the schools didn't want us to talk about that either.
No,
And then I'm a member of Families Supporting Families After Suicide. And same thing, they don't want us to increase the rates of suicide by coming in and talking about it.
no. But if you acknowledge it and know what's going on, you have a responsibility to do something about it, right? As a person. Yeah, we can down with the patriarchal colonial systems. I'm all with you for that. But not very survivor-centered, trauma-informed whatsoever. I only got into a couple schools because my sister's a teacher and she got me to come in to talk to some of her classes. But other than that, we all have a really hard time, except for in Ontario. No, it should be mandated. That's right. It needs to be mandated. And if it was mandated, then they'd have to do it, right? But it's great that you guys see the value of that education and awareness, and you're really creating, a positive space for individuals that maybe are being impacted by trafficking.
Schools Plus is getting a lot of polls that.
That's great. I think that's awesome. It is. Yep.
You can hear that.
Right.
We know that you're all part of.
And I think that like this area is one of the only areas that don't have a community of practice that meet on, like a quarterly, consistent, like where you come together as service providers, as caseworkers, and talk about, without breaching confidentiality, talking about the things that you're seeing, right? Because it takes a community of nonprofits to work together, because you're all probably seeing the same people, but dealing with different needs, right? So I think that communication amongst all of our nonprofits in our community is key, and actually having like a coalition or like a committee that meets and where you just discuss what's going on in your organizations, your challenges, and maybe reaching out for support. It's going on everywhere else across the country. I think just Nova Scotia is a little bit behind, but you think we wouldn't be because we have those numbers and the highest rates. And then we also have, our special human trafficking crown prosecutors, right? In the justice system. And we have our HT units and stuff like that. But we still have a long ways to go. That's what I'm talking about. So we, back in, I think, December, released our 5-year hotline trends from our hotline data, sorry. In 2024, our calls surpassed 5,000 calls in 1 year. That is the biggest jump that we've seen since we came into existence. The center was established in 2016, and then in 2019, the hotline launched. So
don't have the same kind of love and comfort for our neighbors as Nova Scotians do.
That's a good point. I think that Ontario has the most invested with like their anti-HT work funding and everything else. They actually probably have the gold model that every province should model after. But I think you're right. I mean, I can't answer that. It's for the whole country, not just Nova Scotia. So it's for the whole country, from like BC to Labrador, that because we are a national nonprofit. So that's 5,000 calls in total for the whole country for the year since we started, which is a big number.
I think,
Yeah.
I think too, there is definitely a pushback in certain provinces. Like we've reached out to PEI and they flat out said, we don't have a problem here.
They do.
And I was like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, they do.
But if you're going to refuse to look at, then
Yeah.
Yeah.
PEI doesn't think that they have a problem, but they do. It's commercial sexual exploitation. And then they sometimes think, well, it's only in the summertime when tourist season. It's like, no, I'm sorry. I can't tell you that. I can't, no, that's not true. It happens summer, spring, winter, fall. And yes, you do have a problem. And they probably have 7 or 8 organizations in the whole province that will work with individuals, and it's mostly victim services and violence against women shelters that are doing it off the side of their desk and stuff. There's no specific dedicated services in PEI, unfortunately, because I'm the partner specialist there. So yeah, it's nothing.
I was just going to say, I feel like there has to be a heavy correlation with Nova Scotia in terms of our rates of poverty.
Yes,
and
huge.
Housing insecurity. And
It's all-
food insecurity.
it's
and
all-
those things too.
it's
Like, in
all
terms of an
related.
economic
Yep.
standpoint, throughout the rest of
we're
the country.
economically disenfranchised as a province, more so than any other provinces. So that does play a huge factor into our rates and our numbers. Yes, Linda.
One of the things is, my colleague Jean, she has a book written in 1910, and it talks about the human trafficking routes.
Yep.
From Nova Scotia.
Yeah, in 1910.
Yeah, so we also have that, because we're the oldest province.
Yes.
And we have the old trafficking lines, those patterns were established long before even the 1900s.
Yeah.
That's when they started to become recognized, so.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
It's important for people to remember, we've been at this a long time.
A very long time. And I mean, we've identified the corridors in a few slides ahead in my presentation, which we'll talk about, but you know, it's been around forever. We can just say that.
We're sitting in a community where our police chief says that human trafficking does not exist.
Yep.
So that's.
I agree with that statement because in my previous job at the Sexual Assault Center, yes, yes. And I'm not here to bash any police services or anything else like that, but yes, that has been my experience when I was working frontline in this community about 8 years ago. So we have to have the police support. We have to have the support of everybody to be able to combat this. And yes, trafficking is happening all around us. I know trap houses in this community that we know what's going on, right? We know that people are being exploited all the time, right? And people just, if you don't acknowledge it, then you don't have to do something about it. If you turn a blind eye and are ignorant to it, then just pretend it doesn't exist. Yes, behind you, sorry. Yeah.
I'm here because I'm a registered nurse working at a primary care access clinic. So I see a lot of foreign people because they don't have family doctors. But anyway, I don't have a sweet clue that this ever happened. I know nothing. I've never seen it. I don't know anything about it. And not that I need my eyes open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Because you have a really unique position where you're at to see red signs, flags, like people accessing medical services, you know, and sometimes those are the only time that a person's away from their trafficker, where they're alone, where they aren't like behind them or around them. Right. And, you have a unique advantage. So I'm glad that you're here and that you're learning. And like, there's so much information out there on trafficking. There's so many nonprofits that are doing great work across the country. And you can always head to our website. We have a ton of resources, information. I brought a bunch of resources over here for anybody. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight the importance of the hotline. I know we don't get a lot of calls from Atlantic Canada per se. Most of our calls come from Ontario and out west, but we are seeing an increase in calls in the last probably 6 months from Atlantic Canada. Which is great because people are reaching out for help. Like, we are not affiliated with the police, our hotline whatsoever, right? We are there to provide support, and I'll talk about that in a few more slides. I only have 15 minutes, so I got to hurry up. Sorry. Okay, hotline. So here's another trend: labor trafficking. Our cases surged by 300% on our hotline, right? So from 2020 to 2022, we've had an increase of 300%, and also abusive labor practices as well. But we have to think about individuals that are involved in domestic servitude, maybe people that are working. And I'm going to say this, sometimes people take advantage of individuals with intellectual disabilities and get them to do work for them and don't pay them enough or pay them below minimum wage, don't give them breaks. That is labor trafficking. I'm sorry, it is, right? You need to pay people what they're worth. Also, some individuals that, are doing like nannying and cleaning and maybe working for a family, and they're working 18 hours a day and not getting a break. And maybe their employer's charging them rent or taking off, unjustified fees off their paycheck without telling them. That's labor trafficking, right? Like, we have to be mindful. And really, a lot of our temporary foreign workers and our newcomers are really at greater risk because they don't know Canada. They don't know, that we have, these, I'm trying to think of the words, labor laws. Yes, labor laws, right? And English isn't their first language. So of course, they're not going to know, right? So we have seen a lot of those calls, specifically, again, in the agricultural sector, right? I think about, and I'm not saying anything bad, but I think about Millen's Farms, like, and are those people being taken care of properly? Are they being fed? Are they being, are they getting unjustified fees? And I worry about things like that, right? And we just have to make sure that it's on our radar, right? And the last trend is that no community is immune from human trafficking, right? But we are seeing higher incidences in rural communities, like in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick. PEI, not so much. Newfoundland has a really big problem, and they have no funding. They have no strategy to combat human trafficking or anything in that province at all. It's sad to say, but a lot of the nonprofits are doing the work off the side of their desk, right? Like a lot of you guys are too, right? So that is that. Go ahead, yeah.
Fire something, but like if men were being abused, same rape, do you think that there'd be a little bit of a difference?
Yeah.
Trafficking only exists because our society has been built on patriarchy.
Yeah.
If it weren't, then women wouldn't be seen as objects primarily. So I think it's 100% correlated, and that's why it's such a hard thing to get the general population to give a damn about, because
Right.
we are ingrained to believe and act.
Right. I'm just going to briefly talk about our corridors report and our research that we did. I was actually part of the initial research back in 2018 when I was at the Sexual Assault Center. Kind of funny how I got a job here with this organization years down the road, but I just want to identify, because it's super important, we've identified the main corridors across Canada here, right? So the red is the land corridors. We're not going to talk much about the air corridors because we're not talking about that today. We're going to talk about like the land. And then the red is like the destinations, right? So you can see Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the destinations there. But on this slide over here, it just kind of pans in more on our Halifax to Moncton corridor. This is the corridor the traffickers are using all the time to transport victims to New Brunswick and further. The reason why they're going to New Brunswick is because strip clubs are legal in New Brunswick and they're illegal in Nova Scotia. So traffickers are oftentimes transporting victims to the commercial sex market in strip clubs and other places. And also the fact that traffickers can go really undetected when you think about it. If they're renting a car and they're driving from place to place and city to city, how long does it take a police officer or a police agency to set up surveillance, gather information? And how many jurisdictions are you going to go through from Halifax to Moncton, right? You get Halifax Regional Police, the RCMP, Truro Police, Amherst Police, New Brunswick. So there's a lot of different law enforcement. So that is actually working to the traffickers' advantage. And the fact that if they keep transporting and moving their victims from city to city and town to town, it keeps them confused, not knowing where the services are. And it's big money for the trafficker, big money. I'll show you the business model on the next slide from our corridors report. This is the business model. I will say that trafficking is a low risk, high reward crime because traffickers never run out of finding vulnerable people. Drug traffickers run out of drugs. Gun traffickers run out of guns, right? There's always vulnerable people that traffickers can find. So it's, like I said, low risk, high reward, right? So during this research that they did a preliminary scan on Leo list mainly, but there's Leo's list, there's Lecanto, Mega Personals, Ashley Madison, and then all the others, Grindr, like all these other websites that people are advertising for sexual services. So they were charging anywhere from $200 to $400 an hour per commercial sex exchange. So just think about it. If a trafficker says maybe has 4 victims or individuals under their coercion, and they're making $200 to $400 an hour, and they're doing it, say, 6 or 8 hours a day, how many days a week? The number that we did come up with was about $280,000 a year per victim. But the chief officer to combat human trafficking, Jennifer Richardson, who just took a new position with the government, says it's more like $650,000 per victim, what traffickers are making. So low risk, high reward, right? And look at the profit that they're turning off of, right? It's incredible when you think about it. So that's the business model. And then I'm just going to talk about the modes of transportation that we have, or sorry, the types of traffickers identified. Surprise, it's the boyfriend, Romeo, pimp. That is the biggest trafficker through our research. The red is the service provider responses and the black is the law enforcement. So as you can see, it's the boyfriend. Second to organized crime. We know that organized crime and human trafficking are related. Drug dealer, family member at 24%. Peer was at 6%. Drug dealer 14%. Forced marriage 4%. And the back rub illicit massage is at 2%. So those are the type of trackers identified, totally correlating with everything we've been talking about. It's the boyfriend, it's the friend, it's the family member. It's not the strangers, right? It's the people that we trust and that we think love us.
Do you have a stat on like people in power, like teachers or government or anything like that? I would think that would be really high too.
No, but I will tell you that from the past, a lot of individuals that we have supported report that it's doctors, it's lawyers, it's judges, it's people in positions of power, but they're being trafficked too, that are buying the sex. Like a surgeon on the way to work at the IWK would stop in at 5 o'clock in the morning and see an individual on their way to work. Or you're in court doing court support with somebody and they say, oh, that lawyer's a trick. And you're just like, what? Oh, I almost fell off my chair. What? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, right? So do it. No, people in high power. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. I misinterpreted that. No, I don't, but that's really interesting to see at the top. Like you mean at the top.
Yeah.
At the very top.
They don't get caught.
They don't get caught because they're at the top. They've got the fall people. They've got the fall people, right? They got the people doing the work. They're never gonna. It's always the people in power, and it's.
I just add the one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Family members, that people, all the work that I do with Jean is work of mostly all of it is family members.
Yes.
And most of them were trafficked from the age of babies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't realize.
Yep.
They feel 14.
I know.
But it starts at babies because the child pornography, in all the cases you're seeing of men raping babies, it starts somewhere.
Yep.
And we're forgetting about the babies.
100%. 100%.
And, you know, especially if you're a nurse or someone in the healthcare system, you're going to see the babies, you're going to see the children in preschool.
And why, yeah.
In elementary school, you're going to see those kids, and we forget that how they're presenting is they could be a victim. Trafficking.
I attended a conference and a nurse said they had this little child that kept reoccurring with thrush in their mouth all the time, all the time, all the time. This child kept coming in with thrush. And at the end of the day, they found out what was really going on with that child. And it was one nurse that kept saying, this isn't right. You know, it took one person, right, to be able to, yep. We do. And we don't want to think about that because who could ever want to do something like that to a baby or a child? There's a lot of people out there. And so you're right. We do have to have more education and awareness on our children that are younger, for sure. Yep. Especially mothers. Who wants to do it? There's a lot of traffickers out there that are moms. Right. There's no prototype. There's not a checklist. Right. Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, I wish I did have a checklist that I could say a trafficker is this age to this age, he's this height, he's this ethnicity, blah, 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 but there's not, right? You could.
We just have to learn how to be a little more discerning. And
100%. 100%. Yeah. And from our corridors report, we also identified the modes of transportation being a vehicle. As I mentioned, rental vehicles are the number one, right? Because a trafficker is not going to use their own car registered in their own name to be trafficking people around the province or outside of the province, right? Oftentimes they use rental cars, and buses is 16% truck, public transit, and the car, like I said, not owned. I will say that kind of a happy story. The commissionaires in Nova Scotia have all been trained on human trafficking, and they had their tattoo this summer, and they did a human trafficking number. And when I was meeting with them, because we were going over some stuff for their presentation, they said that they had one individual that was a commissionaire working at the Cobequid Pass, took the training, had a car pull up, saw the warning signs, saw the red flags, called the police, and the police intercepted someone being trafficked from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick. So it's getting out there. It's great. I get goosebumps when I think about that because it's like, like they just rolled up and they're like, yeah, this isn't right, ABC. And then they called the police, and the police, like I said, got them, and he saved a victim from being trafficked. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but at least some folks are getting it, right? So, goodness, Claire, I'm going to run out of time. So 85% of Canadians want to help fight trafficking, yet 95% say they need more tools to identify it. From Angus Reid, I'm going to give you a tool. It's a digital toolkit that we have. I have some printed copies over here. It's time to talk about sex trafficking. It's a tough conversation to have with people, but the T stands for teach yourself about the issue, which you're all doing here today. Thank you for coming. And then A is approach the conversation with care and concern, and listen and adapt, and always know that there are resources available. There may not be resources in our community, but there's resources available across Canada that do a lot of virtual support and case management that you can access. So you could always navigate to our national referral directory to find those. Just a few conversation do's and don'ts. I know you are all well aware of, trauma-informed practices, but we really have to be non-judgmental, and we really have to hold space for people, right? We can't be blaming people and using, accusatory language. And if you're ever working with somebody and they're being trafficked and they identify their trafficker as their boyfriend, don't ever call them a trafficker, call them their boyfriend. That's very insulting to that individual, because they really truly do believe that it is their boyfriend, that they are in a romantic relationship. That's one good way to not get any further with somebody if you do that. And always be comfortable with silence, right? Silent and listen are the same words spelt a different way, right? So just somebody might just need a space for you to sit there and just be with them, right? So don't psychoanalyze, don't start the conversation with a lecture, and don't provide directives. You shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have wore that skirt, or you shouldn't have blah, 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 reaffirming those myths and stuff. So just be there. And if you can't support someone, just be honest and say, this is too much for me. I can't do it, but I will refer you to somebody that has the expertise to do so. And this is the hotline's phone number. It's a national hotline and resource center, 1-833-900-1010. We're toll free 24/7. We have access to over 200 languages through teleinterpretation services. We do have English, Spanish, and French speakers on our hotline. Anybody can call the hotline. Our most popular method is the chat, because nobody wants to talk on the phone, especially the demographics of our youth now. So there's the chat, there's a toll-free number you can email, and there's a web form. These are the ways you can contact our hotline. So who can call the hotline? Anybody in this room can call the hotline. It doesn't matter. Victims and survivors can call. We get a lot of family and friends that call. Believe it or not, that's probably the biggest majority of people that call, that say, I saw so-and-so. I think that, I've seen red flags, or there's this, that, just to get a third-party neutral opinion, right? Just to validate what they're feeling. Law enforcement call us sometimes, government agencies, frontline professionals, local advocates and community members, and as well as educators. I wish more educators would call, but anybody seeking assistance or information in Canada can call. And so when you call the hotline, our foundational policies are, of course, do no harm, individual consent, confidentiality, and non-discrimination. We do have a duty to report. Obviously, if somebody is in crisis that is under the age of consent. So those are some of the things I wanted to note. And we do prioritize trauma-informed care. So if somebody calls the hotline, I have another slide on how it goes, but first and foremost, the hotline response advocates are what they're called. We call them HRAs. They prioritize physical and emotional safety. They provide choices and autonomy and control to the caller. They ensure task clarity, informed consent, and manage expectations, and they offer validation and affirmation. I know when we first launched the hotline, people thought that we were this team that we would deploy, human trafficking investigators in communities, and they would take people out. That's not what we do. We do work in partnership with police agencies across the country. We do take tips. It's like a small portion, maybe 2% of our calls. But mainly we just offer people resources and safety planning if they need. So if you ever called, of course, you're going to get a recording, you'll be triaged and then a live answer. And then they're just going to go in, do you need a safety plan? You know, then your needs and options, and then there's follow-up. We will never call anybody back on the hotline. You do get a case number in case you have to call back, so you're not re-traumatized and you don't have to tell your story over and over again.
Do you work with child welfare?
We have child protection protocols. No.
No?
No.
I fostered for 15 years. I had 2 infants that were.
Yep.
Mom.
Yep.
Both went back home.
Oh, okay. That's a lot. Yeah, that's not good.
Does
No.
the police take you more, like if I was to call the police and give them an besides this person. If I was to call
Yeah.
them my concern about my client.
Yep.
You get a lot of no help. So like I had a 13-year-old that was locked in a closet.
Yep.
Police don't believe you, or she's there consensually, or I had to go with a friggin' bat and get the kid out myself because the police wouldn't take me seriously. So if I called your hotline.
Yep.
And you guys called the police, would they take you more serious?
I would hope so, because we have to pass those tips on to the proper policing agency. We would contact them through their whatever protocol they have for us, because each agency has a different reporting protocol. So with, say, Halifax, there's a certain reporting protocol. You have to call this person on duty and you have to send this email and so on and so forth. But if you're going to send something like that to the hotline, yeah, for sure they would send it along. But then we can't guarantee that the police are going to action it or anything else. But you can also call the human trafficking provincial hotline, like I'd mentioned before, with the RCMP, or Crime Stoppers. I know that's also another option, but we're a non-police option. So a lot of people feel more comfortable calling the hotline and saying and discussing things. So these are some of the service, like I mentioned: safety planning, connecting to social services, emotional support, general information, and discussing and reporting potential cases of trafficking. And I'm almost done, so Claire can come up. We do have a national referral directory. Like I mentioned, we have about 1,000 service providers from coast to coast. So you can just go online, punch in Truro if you're looking for support. Women's support, the Lotus Centre will come up and it'll give you all their information and the programs that they offer. So super easy. I would have to say about 20% of our referral directory is actually human trafficking specific, which is a huge gap, right? Across the country. We need a lot more funding and a lot more programs for victims and survivors of trafficking to reach support. And I have a couple more slides left. Sorry. Here's our awareness resources. There's a bunch on the table for anybody that would like them. We can get them translated into, I think, 16 Indigenous languages. There's QR codes. Please feel free to navigate. It's all free. If you're a nonprofit that can't afford printing costs, we will print them and ship them to you. And I'll end with becoming an anti-trafficking ally. So you can learn about trafficking, which you are doing today, and talk to the young people in your life. You can support the movement by collaborating with survivor leaders. I will say survivors know best. Lived experience are the best supporters out there. They've lived it, they've walked it, they know. You can have 6 master's degrees and a PhD, but that's not going to compare to lived experience or survivors. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Well, we're working on an ethical survivor engagement model for the whole country right now. Our research and data team is, so stay tuned for that. On ethical storytelling and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm not part of that, but you can host an anti-trafficking training or workshop, or you can hang a poster and amplify the message. We're social. You can see our social media stuff. And we have a brand new website that we just launched last month. There's my information. I live in Truro, so I am available to do in-person presentations within 2-hour drive, because I don't want to drive any further than that. But I can do a lot of virtual stuff. So just let me know if anybody's interested. I really appreciate your time. I know I talked a lot, and honestly, I could have probably talked another hour. And if you ever want to do a deeper dive into anything, if you want me back to do anything, send me an email, because I love doing the public education piece and letting people know what's going on in our communities. And I don't get invited to too many parties anymore, because that's all I talk about. It's trafficking. So people are like, yeah, we don't want her coming. She's the buzzkill. But no, this is reality, people. They don't want to hear. Exactly. So thank you for your time. I know I've talked a lot, but thank you. And Claire, I didn't even have this microphone on. So- All right, thank you. I'm here for the rest of the time if anybody wants to talk.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Gallagher, and I work for the Elizabeth Fry Society of Mainland Nova Scotia. And I am the peer support coordinator for a program called GATE. And GATE is Girls Against Trafficking and Exploitation. And we are a province-wide program. We have offices here in Truro through the Truro Program Center. We have an office down in Shelburne. We have an office in Sydney through the Elizabeth Fry Society of Sydney. And obviously, we will travel wherever is needed. And I'm a survivor of human trafficking. And I go out and I speak about my experience and my, my story. And, as you said, survivors are the ones that know this inside and out. So I work with survivors. I work with those that are at risk of being survivor. I'd rather prevent somebody from being exploited or trafficked. We provide, there's 3 beds that we have in Nova Scotia for those that have been trafficked. It's not ideal, but we do what we can. And we provide mental health supports. We provide, just peer support, like whatever support that person needs. I'm also a pro-sex worker, not as a worker now, but I am pro-sex. And if somebody comes to me and says, I want to work, and they're not under the age of 19, and they are not being exploited, and that kind of stuff, I will help them. I will show them how to screen and how to be safe in doing sex work, because reality is prostitution is legal in Canada, right? So we've got sort of this 2 sides to this. And so it doesn't mean that you have to be under the age of a certain age to be trafficked. I was in my 30s when I was first trafficked. So it wasn't like I was some homeless person. I worked in the provincial government. I had a good paying job. I had my own place, like all of the things. And I was still trafficked. And in reality, my story is my trafficker was my domestic partner. But I'm not typical. My domestic partner was a woman. So for 25 years, I thought I was a survivor of domestic violence. That's what I thought it was. And so for 25 years, I was beaten, I was coerced, I was manipulated, financial exploitation, sexual exploitation, physical, all of the things. And in the end, I ended up trying to kill my trafficker. So I ended up going to jail. I spent 369 days in provincial jail in New Brunswick at the New Brunswick Women's Correctional Facility. And then I was sentenced to 4.5 years in federal prison. So I spent time at Nova Institute for Women. And it wasn't until I left Nova that I went to the Elizabeth Fry Society halfway house in Cape Breton, and I started doing some additional work with them. And that's when I realized that I had been trafficked, that I wasn't just a survivor of domestic violence, that trafficking was, in fact, the core of my story. And I work with clients that have been through like horrific things. Like I thought my story was horrific. I've got permanent brain injuries as a result of the domestic violence. And I was ostracized from my family. I've got a family that absolutely loves me, but I was told on a regular basis, no, they don't love you. They don't want anything to do with you. And my son, I didn't speak to him for a number of years because he was so angry that I was still with my partner. And it wasn't until I went to prison, and I remember the parole board saying to me, "Why didn't you leave?" And I got really upset about that because I said, that's not the right question to be asking me. The question is not, why didn't I leave? Because I left many, many times. I left well over 100 times. I went all the way across Canada to get away from her. So it wasn't that I didn't leave, I couldn't stay away. And that's the problem. And until you understand that, okay, you have to recognize that it's easy to leave, but it's harder to stay away. Okay. And when the parole board asked me that, I got upset about that because I felt like, are you kidding me? Like, after everything I've been through, that's what you're going to concentrate on, is you're putting the blame on me. Now, I fully accept my part in my crime. I am not sitting here saying, oh, woe is me, any of that kind of stuff. There were things I could have done that I didn't do. However, it wasn't that I didn't ask for help. I went to mental health. I went to addiction services. I went to transition houses. I went like everywhere. I asked for help, and I was told over and over again, you're not enough of an alcoholic. You don't have any mental health issues. And I'm like, really? I beg to differ. And so they would say, yeah, just go to a 12-step meeting. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. What is a 12-step meeting? Where? Like, well, you can look it up online. And I remember feeling like so alone that nobody was willing to step forward and say, hey, do you want help? I'm willing to help you. And so that's why I do what I do today, because I don't ever want somebody else to feel like they don't have somebody to support them. And I've worked with clients, like one client in particular, she had been kidnapped from the strip club. She was a stripper at the time. She had been lured into a party, drugged, taken to another location. She didn't even know what city she was in. She was held captive for 9 months. She was beaten, she was drugged, she was raped on a regular basis by clients. And it wasn't until she realized that nobody was coming to help her. She realized her family didn't even realize she was missing. Her family just sort of went, well, that's her. She's just, doing her thing. So nobody even realized she was missing. So she realized that the only way she was going to support, to help herself, was to break out herself. So she literally broke out of this hotel. She was wearing a tank top and thongs. That's it. She had nothing on her feet. It was in the middle of winter. She was running down a major highway in Ontario. And then she found like a McDonald's, and she went into the McDonald's, crossed over like 8 lanes of highway, went into McDonald's, passed out, woke up 3 or 4 days later in hospital. And she says, what about the other girls? And they were like, what are you talking about? We don't know what you're talking about. And she said that she kept hearing the screams of other girls in other rooms. And she couldn't get that out of her. Like, she didn't care about her own safety, her own survival. She wanted them. So with help from the police in Ontario, they were able to finally figure out which hotel she had been at. She didn't even know. So they were to figure it out, and they were able to rescue. I think there was something like 8 other women that had been held captive. Right? And that was her. I remember when she told that story, she came to one of our gala events that we were having, and it was supporting Gate. And I asked if she wanted to be a speaker, and she was so honored. She was just like, wow, somebody wants to hear me, little me. And she told her story. We went out and got her a nice dress and made sure her hair was done. And, you know, she was feeling great. She told this story, you know, and she disclosed, so it's not something that I'm disclosing, but she contracted HIV as a result of this. She is an IV drug user now. And she struggles with, you know, overcoming all of the things that she's overcoming. She recently had a baby, and CPS took control of the baby. And so it hasn't been the happy ending that I had hoped it would be. I'm still in contact with her. She's still doing anything and everything she can, you know, to get better. But this is a woman that ran away when she was 16 because her family was abusive, and the only option she had was to sell her body. Okay, and I think that we as a society, we need to be kinder. Right now, I'm being crucified online because there's a website that is like, you know, all of the people that have committed crimes over the year. So I was profiled one day, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And it's really interesting. My friends said to me, they said, aren't you upset? I said, actually, I think it's kind of funny. And she said, why? Like, why is this funny to you? And I said, because A, it's not the story. If you Google my name, I tried to kill my partner because the cab company brought Budweiser instead of Bud Light. That's why I tried to kill my domestic partner. Yeah, it sounds about right. That's not the story, but that's the only thing, because I retained the right to remain silent. And the only thing that I disputed in all of that was they said, well, there was like 48 beers in your place. And I said, no, there wasn't. There was only 24. And they said, no. Neighbor said that the cab came with a box of beer, and then they came a little bit later and another box of beer. I said, no. I sent the box of beer back to get the right kind of beer. So that's how the story is. So I need people to understand that what you're reading online is never the story, is never the real story. And if you are going to throw stones at glass houses, yeah, I feel sorry for you. But so they said, you know, do you want us to do something? And I said, no, just leave it alone. It's gonna, you know what I mean? And it turns out that the guy that's running that particular site raped his own children. Interesting. And so do I want to be petty? Because I can be petty. I am good at being petty. Should I create my own website specifically focusing on this guy? And I went, you know what? I don't have the tolerance, patience, energy for that, right? I'm 62 years old. I don't have that in me anymore to do that, right? But I work with people that will come to me and say, hey, listen, I need support. And the first thing people say to me, they ask me, they said, what should I do? What should I do? When my daughter, my sister, my brother, my whatever is, and I said, did you ask them what they need, what support they want? Don't ever assume you know what they want. Sometimes all they'll say to me, I just, you know what, I really like painting. I can help you with that. We can get you paint supplies. We can get you that kind of stuff. Don't assume that the first step is to go to the police. Have they received medical care? Do they need to go see a sane nurse? Okay. So many times people have said to me, nobody's ever asked me that. And I'm like, yeah, let's take you to sane nurse. Let's get you checked out medically. I remember having to go to emergency room for an HIV test. This is years and years and years ago, but I asked for an HIV test and the doctor says, we can't do that. And I said, why not? Well, because, they're expensive. And I went, really? Okay. And she goes, why do you need an HIV test? And I said, well, because I'm a prostitute and I have sex with people and I don't use condoms. So I think I need to get an AIDS test. And she went, oh my God, that was not the truth. But it was the only way I could figure out how to get an HIV test. So it's on my medical record. Prostitute, doesn't use condoms. And anytime I go to a doctor, they're like, so. I'm like, oh yeah, you're reading that part now, are you? Okay. Like, you know what I mean? But I think people need to understand that we need to support people in whatever way is needed that they need. And we need to ask them. We need to be kind to those that are going through the criminal system. I refuse to call it criminal justice system because there's no justice in it. People that have been brutalized and they fight back, they're the ones that end up going to jail, not the abusers. Nova Scotia has an epidemic right now of gender-based violence. It's out of this world. And we need to figure out how we're going to fix that. But I don't want to see more studies. I want to see action. That's what I want. We need to stop studying it. I know that there's a minister's table. Great to see they're doing that. Not one person from the Elizabeth Fry Society was invited. A lot of us applied. So they don't want the criminals at the table. Interesting. I'm not aware of. I'm aware of at least two. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, yeah, it's.
They don't want bulldogs at the table, right?
Yeah. And like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's, I would like to see Truro have a agency committee. I think that would be a great idea. We can meet where the problems are and where we need to, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the hard part about getting action out of it is because the stakeholders aren't joining the table. It's the frontline service providers that are already stretching their budgets as thin as they can, not the people who can fork out the dollars.
Exactly. I was actually on a panel once. It was me, Stephanie Atwood, Anna Flynn from EFI, and then a couple of other people, and then Arnold Pearson. And we didn't realize that he was anti, and like he was part of the you know what I mean, the human trafficking, let's send them all to jail. And Elizabeth Fry is like, we're like abolitionists. Like we don't send people to jail if we can avoid it. And so he's talking, he's like, and I was sitting there going like, oh no, hold on a second. I don't know what I'm going to. And Emily Coyle, who is the executive of CAVE, which is the international or Canadian-wide EFRI, she spoke up and she was able to, say some really great points to him, that sending people to jail is not the answer, right? My ex-husband had been a sex worker as a youth, as a 15 and 16-year-old boy. And he thought, I'm just a sex worker. And I'm like, let's have a conversation about that. You were trafficked. And he says, no, I wasn't trafficked. Well, it's against the law, and he, well, and he can't wrap his head around that he was exploited. And I actually talk about using the word exploitation instead of trafficking, because trafficking is a very specific criminal code violation. 2 out of 3 things need to occur in order for it to be considered trafficking. Whereas if we talk about exploitation, people know what that word is. And so using the proper language so that people understand what things are. When we talk about coercion, most people go, dictionary, what does coercion mean? We know that it's a bad thing, but we're not really sure what the actual definition is of it. So age of consent, huge. I talk a lot about this with our youth. Age of consent, 12 and 13-year-olds, no more than 2 years. So 24 months older. 14 and 15, no more than 5 years, 60 months apart in age. 16 and up, all gloves are off. So you can have sex with anybody they want, except when the person's under care and control of the other person, when the person's that person has power over them. I've had 16-year-olds come to me and say, I want to be a sex worker. And I'm like, you can't. And they're like, why not? And it's like, because it's against the law. And they're like, what do you mean it's against the law? Age of consent is 16. I can have sex with anyone I want. Not if they're forcing you or they're giving you money or they're, anything like that. If you're saying you have to provide this service if you want to sleep on my couch, things like that. And so explaining those things to them and to parents and to police. Unfortunately, I've run into many cases where even the police do not understand law. I've got a client whose daughter is 14 years old in New Brunswick. Her boyfriend is 23. He is a drug user. She is turning tricks in order to get money so that he can get his drugs. And the police will do nothing about it because they're saying, well, and I'm like, even if you were to take age of consent, he's older than the 5 years. And they're like, yeah, well, they are finally starting to do something in this particular case because she was just arrested.
I was gonna say, as soon as she shoplifts.
Yeah. Now they've got to do something about it. It's like, yeah. Good.
Yes, we have. So talk in these situations because unless we have a victim come forward and give a statement, how do we take that to court? How do we lay a charge when we have nobody that's going to go on the stand and testify? So when it comes to human trafficking, listen, number one is safety. Charging the individual, oh, that's asked. But really, we just want you safe. That's what we're.
Well, I
if she gives us a statement, then we can look at the trafficker.
I'm going to flip this a little bit though. There is the option of saying, okay, we can't maybe necessarily do anything under the law, but maybe we can bring child services in here because they have more leeway to be able to do something about it. What I'm saying is that when somebody is told we can't do anything about it, and they're not told you need to have the victim make a statement, and the victim is like, I'm not giving a statement because this is my boyfriend.
If you, I don't know.
Yeah.
True. If
Yeah.
you came in
Mhm.
and, obviously, I would do a CAS.
Yeah.
I would do what I could.
Yeah.
If we would set up surveillance, if there was, so you look
Right.
into it to see what is, and of course, cost effective.
Right.
If we have no idea what time he's leaving, or I can't
Right.
sit on his house all day.
No.
Follow along.
Yeah.
But if we say, hey, listen, we know that he's got something arranged for this time or whatever.
Right.
perfect. Set up an operation.
Yeah.
Interject.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have a question. Just want clarification when you're saying that, because my understanding in all the training that I've received is that if they're underage, it's not up to the victim to get the evidence, it's up to the police. No, because we still, if I still need somebody. No, I know that, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, if a 13-year-old comes to you and said, like, that this has happened, my understanding is that you guys are supposed to find the evidence because they're underage.
We,
And the
but we
CPS
still
records,
need
yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, that's what I mean,
We
but-
still need somebody to give us a ticket. We can look into it, but there's no charges unless we actually have somebody who's in a state. The only time we can do that is domestic violence, and that's, I'm gonna say relatively new. That we can actually lay a charge even if the victim doesn't make the statement. It's the only.
So maybe we can challenge that and say, how are we doing on time? Pardon me? Okay. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for your attention and your, I am always open to discussions, private discussions. I've had people come to me after presentations and said, I didn't realize that I had been trafficked. Can I talk to you about that? It's confidential. I don't report anything to anybody, things like that. I've left my cards at the front, plus some of our other stuff that we have. And as I said, we're at the Truro Program Center, which is 69 Brunswick Street. We have drop-ins available, but we can also do one-on-ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you.